words gifted and talented are probably among the most controversial in the field of education. I don't think that a single week goes by that I don't get an email or a telephone call from a parent, from a teacher, an administrator, occasionally a person in policy-making positions that is asking about who's gifted, how do we identify who's gifted, how do we provide services to gifted and talented students. My journey in this field really began back in the 1960s when I was in graduate school, and at that time there wasn't a lot of controversy about who was gifted and who wasn't gifted. They used IQ cutoff scores. The standard usually was 130. If you had a 130 IQ, welcome to gifted land. If you had a 129 IQ, sorry you didn't make it. However, one of the things that I've done ever since I was a child was read biographies and autobiographies about the lives of people of great accomplishment. And also observing many of the young friends that I had, people that I went to school with, people that I worked with. And I began to think about the fact that there has got to be more to the making of giftedness than just simply IQ cutoff scores. Some of the early works that I read had some interesting stories. Just to give you a few examples, and there are literally dozens of these. As a boy, Thomas Edison's teacher told him he was too stupid to learn anything. He said of school, "I remember that I was never able to get along at school. I was always at the foot of my class. I used to feel that my teachers did not sympathize with me, and even my own father thought that I was stupid." Louisa May Alcott was once told by an editor that she could never write anything that had popular appeal, and Walt Disney was fired by a newspaper editor because the editor said he didn't have any good ideas. Even Einstein, who we all worship because of his great intellect, was 4 years old before he could speak, 7 before he could read. He was considered dull by his parents and teachers, and he failed an examination that would have allowed him to become a teacher 3 different times. All of this really led me to eventually develop an article that I wrote in the 1970s called "What Makes Giftedness? Re-examining a Definition." And in this article, I pointed out that there really are 2 types of giftedness. And I divided these into 2 categories. One I called high-achieving giftedness. Those are students who learn extremely well, who have very good test scores, get their homework done on time, typical teacher pleasers. The other are what I called creative productive giftedness. And the case studies that I just reported to you are all people who were considered to be highly creative and productive. So I think that these are all examples that I tried to point out in my work in the development of a theory which is popularly known as the 3-ring conception of giftedness. And what I pointed out in this theory was that highly creative, productive, as opposed to lesson learning giftedness, is really a combination of an interaction between and among 3 different clusters of traits, which you see in the diagram. The one that really surprised me the most was the one in the upper left-hand corner, because what the research tells us is that many of the creative, productive people, again, referring back to my very brief case studies, come from the above average but not necessarily superior levels of ability as measured by tests of intelligence and aptitude. The second is creativity, the ability to generate lots of different ideas, to challenge convention, to challenge existing ways of doing things. And the third cluster of traits is task commitment. And think of this as a sort of focused form of motivation. Motivation in psychological terms refers to a general cluster of traits. You're motivated to be a good parent or teacher or member of your church. Task commitment is that energy more like a laser beam focused in on something very particular. And there are a couple of quotations that I like to share related to both of these things. When it comes to task commitment, the artist is nothing without the gift, but the gift is nothing without the work. And then again, an Einstein quote related to creativity, imagination is more important than exercise. However, what I have argued is that we should be looking at a much broader range of characteristics than just academic test scores. And this is important to me because the field itself has changed its mind. The field talks now much more about the development of giftedness or the development of gifted behaviors in young people.
The basic idea of the triarchic theory is that people who are intelligent know what they do well, and then they make the most of it in their life. They somehow incorporate it in their lives and use it. They figure out what they don't do well, their weaknesses, and then they find ways around that.
I believe that one of my strengths is that I know what it is that I don't know, and I try to use the resources around me. Many of the people that work with me, for example, have skills in particular areas that are much stronger than mine, and I enjoy that because I know that I can go to that individual and ask a question about something that I don't know too much about.
The triarchic theory focuses on 3 critical areas: analytical ability, creative intelligence, and practical intelligence.
Analytical intelligence is what you use when you analyze things like problems. So, for example, you analyze a mathematics problem, or you might compare and contrast 2 systems of government, or you might critique something like critique a concert. What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? Why? But the basic idea is this sort of critical thinking that you do. Practical intelligence is what you use when you put into practice your abilities. So, for example, you learn something in a math class and you use it in doing your income taxes. Or you might implement something, like you or someone else has come up with a plan, and it's one thing to have the plan, but can you really make it work? Creative intelligence is what you use when you come up with good new ideas. So you might create a poem, or you might create a work of art, or you might create a relationship with somebody. Or imagine what it would be like if temperatures in the world increased 20 degrees all of a sudden. What would be the effects? So what's common to all these things is thinking in relatively novel ways rather than familiar ways.
Alfred Bennett, residing in Paris, was approached with a problem. He was asked, "Can you devise some kind of instrument to help us predict who will succeed and who will fail?" Being an ingenious fellow, what he came up with succeeded as far as the Parisian elders were concerned, and the resulting intelligence test gave way to the measure of intelligence quotient, or rather IQ. Its purpose? To give an early indication of how smart someone is. If we zoom forward in time, 1914 sees a world war, 1939 sees a second. 1943 saw the birth of Howard Gardner, and in 1983 he published his works on intelligence and told the world about his theory of multiple intelligences. Gardner's theory explored for the first time the possibility of there being multiple platforms for intelligence. He devised, after much research, that there were indeed at least 7 different platforms. He labelled his 7 platforms, or modules of intelligence, as logical mathematical, linguistical, spatial, musical, bodily kinesthetic, intrapersonal. Each platform housed a different set of skills and capabilities which, when added to contextual and cultural situations, resulted in a considered high ability individual within that field. In modern society, linguistic and logical mathematical modules of intelligence are still seen as the most important and traditional forms of intelligence. Spatial intelligence mainly refers to the ability to form a visual representation of the world and use this mental representation to operate. You could quite commonly be in this group if you're an artist, an engineer, an architect. Surgeons even have this, and even sailors of the South Seas. Musical intelligence is quite self-explanatory. Mozart was obviously musically intelligent and gifted. The ability to use your whole body, or even just a small part of it, to fashion and create a product or to solve a problem could be placed within the bodily kinesthetic intelligence platform. This level of intelligence can often be reflected in the works of dancers, athletes, and craftspeople. Interpersonal intelligence is the ability to understand people and how to work practically with them. That salesman knocking on your door is probably very good at this, but maybe you don't think so. If we swap this last skill on its head though, those that can look inwardly at their own abilities and recognise our own wishes and dislikes as well as fears are often known as being intrapersonal. What is key in the theory of multiple intelligences is that being strong in one intelligence has no real or particular implications or correlations to strengths or weaknesses in other platforms. Intelligence is described as being an ability to solve a problem or to fashion a product which is valued in one or more cultural settings. And as described by Gardner, this means that intelligence is no longer a term for just the mathematical minded, but for all. 7 unrelated platforms. Which train of intelligence are you on?